Yeah, you're going to have to update me on the local issues and the Good Samarites.
Ma'am, first question, you visited Cebu for the one of the biggest transport conventions that's happening in the country. Your message to them, give us an update. What was your message to them? Your visioning and the importance of such a sector in our country.
Yes, I was just assigned as committee chairman of the Senate Committee on Cooperatives. And I'm just learning about co-ops. Nasabak ako sa pinaka-komplikadong sektor, the transport sector. As we know, it's rife with problems. And they have every reason to complain and ask for government support. To the extent that we can, we will do that. My brother has already said that every effort will be made to buy government to government or through other private channels. From all sources, even exploring Russia, India, the Middle East, as well as our friends here in ASEAN and of course China, so that we can bring the cost of gasoline. I think it's the first time in my entire life that diesel is now more expensive than gas. Yeah. So it's an extraordinary and bizarre development. We no longer understand what's going on in the oil sector. But I assured them that any effort to cut down VAT, for example, and give the President authority to suspend or reduce the VAT rates would be helpful, but that excise tax might be difficult since the primary beneficiaries would be the big companies. They were also complaining about the vehicle modernization. As we know, that's been a very controversial measure. We all want a new car, we all want a new bus, a new vehicle. The truth is, there's very little money on the ground. And the OTR initially only provided 80,000 pesos for a vehicle that was European level 4 standard at 2.5 million pesos. Paano naman yon? So that's the area that we need to address, as well as the requirements for routing so that hindi naman yung kolorong ang makikinabang and so on and so forth. Ang daming problema, kawawa naman talaga. Siyempre, yung pandemic hindi nakatulong na close open ang ating mga ruta. Yung ibang lugar, nag-lockdown, magbubukas, lockdown na ulit, talagang nakakahilo. So I think we really need to help the transport sector in every way that we can. After all, they are the arteries of our economy, the lifeblood that keeps the economy running.
Talking about the problems, Senator, of course, you're experiencing inflation right now in the whole country. So you have already described the cost of living in the Philippines as a living nightmare. So how can we solve this, or how are we addressing this right now and in the future?
Sabi nga sa Manila, baka naman ang aabutin natin Paskong tuyo. Mabuti pa sa Cebu, at least Paskong danggir. Pero napakalupit naman nun. So this is what we're trying to address. We're very grateful that my brother's surveys for the first 100 days are in general positive. But we are all aware that the cost of living at 6.9 inflation, official pa yun, talagang masaklap. Particularly food inflation. Food inflation that impacts upon the poor very squarely and harshly. We know that upwards of 60% of the poorer members of our population spend their money on food. Up to 60% of their spend is really in food. So, pag tumaas ng kaunti ang pagkain, tama talaga sa leeg ang mahihirap. So this is what we need to bring down. I'm recommending that we revive the old legacy project of Kadiwa. I think General Espina here is old enough to remember that, but maybe you aren't, maybe others aren't. Choi is certainly old enough to remember Kadiwa. Kadiwa was a legacy project from my parents, and it sought to feed the metropolis. Basically, it was a distribution network bringing the harvest from the outlying regions to Metro Manila, Metro Cebu, to make certain that the metropolitan areas, which were heavily populated, would be fed. Sana gawin natin yan ulit because as we know, kahit papano sa bukid may pagkain, pero sa syudad, hirap. So let's try and do that. Secondly, once again, even importation, we should be more innovative, think out of the box, and do what my Bisaya mother always used to do, which was really to go all around the world and try to get cheaper imports, much cheaper government to all government donations or even imports. And in the case of Morocco, I remember she had to go there. We had no fertilizer, just as we don't today. And she had no clearance to pay for the phosphate of Morocco. What she did, at that time, we had a lot of sugar. Nag-exchange deal, nag-barter na lang, nagkaliwaan na lang kasi walang pera eh. And so this is the kind of Bisaya na innovation and thinking out of the box that we need today. Thirdly, I think we also need to learn how to value add our products. Our products are always being sold in the raw state. Primarily, for example, coconut. Wala na tayong naisip kundi copra. When in fact, coconut juice, extra virgin coconut oil, and cocoa sugar are in great global demand. So these are the things we need to do. And of course, bring down the cost of production. Once again, the problems of fertilizer, of feed, of fuel, rear their ugly heads. So that's the problem. And finally, bring investment to the countryside and agricultural infrastructure. Wala nang nag-invest sa irigasyon. Hirap na hirap tayo sa tubig. Cebu is one of the hardest hit in terms of water, despite local government's efforts at collating all the available surface water. And irrigation continues to be a problem. Ang dami kong sinabi, kayo na next.
Partner, pasalamatan natin yung Eagles, yung mga ate na Eagles na nagbigay din ng bouquet, talagang inabangan talaga si Senator Imee. Thank you na lang. Ako na lang papasalamat sa inyo.
Maraming salamat. I didn't realize. I thought the pink ladies were the ones who gave them to me. Okay, so the Eagles. Eagles ba kayo?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. Thank you very much. Kayo lang yung pink na gusto ko. Hindi, tapos na yan. No. It's finished. I'm back to loving pink.
Now we will open the floor for questions from Cebu Media. Please state your name and your network and your question, please.
May buntag.
Yes, may buntag.
May buntag, Senator Imee, this is...
Bye, Mike.
May check.
Off daw ba sila?
May buntag, Senator Imee, this is...
Nagtatanalan ng
Paggamit na lang din.
Anong mic?
Paggamit na yun eh.
Paggamit na lang.
Sige.
Mic check. May buntag, Senator Imee, this is...
Ayan na siya, natanga lang siya.
May buntag, Senator Imee, this is Gian Navarro from CCTN Channel 47. Napag-alaman po natin na kayo po ay isa sa mga sumulo or isa sa mga isinulong niyo po ay ang reforma sa barangay and SK officials like extending their terms up to 6 years. So, would you mind kung ano pa, iba pa mga reforma ang isusulong niyo for the barangay and SK officials, Senator?
Actually, nung umpisa, ayoko nang i-extend kasi ang gulo-gulo na. So, magulo pa rin sa awa ng Diyos. Yung COMELEC humihingi ng karagdagan 10 billion. Medyo nagwala ako. Sabi ko, alam ba ninyo? Meron na kayong 8 billion, dadagdagan pa ng 10 billion. Mas mahal pa yung barangay election kesa sa presidential, vice presidential, senatorial, congressional, mayor, governor election. So, tignan natin. Bawas-bawasan nila. Hindi na pwede yung ganyang halaga. So, despite that, it seems that there's a crying need to postpone. So, nakisama naman tayo na i-postpone na lamang October 2023 ngayon ang nakatakdang eleksyon. But I have told all my colleagues, and they're fully aware of my opinion, which is, as chairman of the Committee on Electoral Reform in the Senate, I think we should use this valuable time not merely to extend the terms of our barangay officials, but more importantly, to look at the system of the barangay. Halos lahat ng eleksyon pinopostpone. Wala na tayong ginawa kundi mag-postpone ng barangay election. So that appears to me to prove that there's an issue with the length of the term. There really should be a longer term because we're always postponing so that the effective term of the past barangay chairman has been 5 years. So, ihabaan na lang natin so that it works together with the presidential term. 1 year after the presidential election, right away, yung sumunod na May, magbarangay na. So that's what we could consider. But we could also organize and reorganize the ABC midterm so that we can give chance to the others. Secondly, I think it's time we look at the SK. The SK charter indicates the first anti-dynasty provision. Despite its good intent, however, we're fully aware that in small barangays, it serves to disqualify almost half or 1/3 of the population. Because in a small barangay of 200, 300, 400 voters, lahat naman magkamag-anak. So, pag second degree of consanguinity or affinity, almost everyone is related and then they become disqualified. As a result, the SK Council at the barangay and municipal levels are not complete. Very often, they're incomplete. So I'm recommending that perhaps what would be best is to have a single SK or youth representative at barangay and municipal level instead. And maintain the federations only at the larger city and provincial levels. So these are the things we've earned ourselves some time, 10 months. And during these 10 months, let's think about the systems very well so that they finally work and we don't have to keep rushing a postponement while COMELEC wastes time and money trying to prepare for an election that will never happen.
Daghang salamat.
Thank you.
Hi, Senator Imee. My name is John Arua from PTV4.
Magandang tanghali po.
Senator, I would just like to ask, some are calling for the appointment of separate day secretary, considering the problems you are facing in the agri-industry. Do you think, Senator Imee, that there should be a DE secretary, not the president, to also spare them from any from other agri issues, so he can also focus on some important things?
Yes, I think in the beginning, I thought that it was a very good idea for the president to take on the portfolio of agriculture because it's clearly the most urgent problem. Traditionally, ang presidente may kinukuha na department. Yung tatay ko ay kinuha yung Department of Defense dahil panahon ng Vietnam War yun at nagkakagulo. Sa Clark, sa Subic, sa lahat ng ating mga iba't ibang base. So, he took the defense. Yung kapatid ko, sabi niya, pinakamalaking problema natin ay yung pagkain, so yung agriculture ang kinuha. So, I was hoping, and I'm still hoping, na once and for all, magalit na siya sa mga smuggler. Natigilan niya yung agricultural smuggling na walang tigil. Siyempre, marami tayong kaibigan dito sa Cebu, marami tayong kaibigan sa Mindanao, marami tayong kaibigan sa Subic, sa Batangas. Pero ang nangyayari talagang technical smuggling ng pagkain. Pinapatay ang mga magsasaka na lokal. So I'm hopeful that he'll finally get angry at hulihin lahat yan at may konting fear factor kahit papano ang office of the president. So that was the intention. But not to hang on to the Department of Agriculture for a long, long time. As a matter of fact, nakapwesto na dyan yung dating USEC, Ding Panganiban, and the rest. So, dapat yung malalakas na USEC, sila na magpatakbo. Pero, kinakailangan siguro, magalit na yung Pangulo natin at paghuhuli na yung mga tanyag na nagpapasok ng kung ano-ano. Nasasama pa dyan, because it's all under the radar, yung sakit. I think you're all aware that the African swine flu, yung ASF, pumasok yan sa imported na baboy. Ganon din yung mga iba't ibang kokolisap. Ang duda nila, nang galing rin sa import na hindi dumaan ng first border controls. Wala talaga, nakalusot. So yan, dapat ang mga hulihin kaagad. Hindi na ang Pangulo ang siyang tututok sa bawat detalye ng agrikultura.
Thank you, Senator.
Hi, good afternoon, Senator Imee. I'm Sharm Zaspina from PTV4 as well. Fresh from the National Transport Co-op event, Senator, one issue comes to mind alongside the PUV modernization program and proposed solutions. This issue, for me, is the obliteration of the iconic jeepney to give way to modernization. What would you, Senator, propose solutions to be able to move forward into the future and at the same time preserve our culture and history?
Yes, there's been much discussion about the jeepney, and as you said, it's iconic. For us, my personal experience as a governor in Lawa, we preserved the carretela and the calesas. We preserved them, but we limited them to certain heritage areas. As a matter of fact, we enhanced them. Some of them we turned into electric vehicles to help along the other older carretela masters who no longer had a horse. So, in-electrify pa nga namin at linagyan pa namin ng ilaw so that the tourists could ride in the carriages with the horses. Yung carretela at yung kalesa, kaya nila umikot sa Paway Church, sa Lawag Bell Tower, with lights. And that way we preserved it so that it was intact as an 17th, 18th, 19th century scenario. We limited them to certain sectors and converted some to electric vehicles. That was our solution at that point in time. And yes, we do not want to lose the jeepney by any means. It's not only an icon of Philippine roadways, but more importantly to me, a symbol of Philippine resilience and innovation. So I think it's important we maintain it, but it has to still remain useful, modern, and sustainable.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Morning, Senator.
The calesas are so nice. They're all lit. Yeah, they're so fun. They have music pa nga daw.
Senator, I'm Mitch from the Freeman.
Mick, is that you? Okay, that's me.
Yeah.
May camera ka in front. Okay.
Yeah, I'm live. Senator, this libreng sakay offered by the DOTR has been very successful. In fact, in Cebu, there are over 4 million commuters were able to benefit of that. Are you suggesting that this should be continued because it has been stopped after the Duterte administration?
Yes, that's right. Yun nga ang problema. Nung nag-umpisa yung face-to-face classes, doon pa naubos ang budget para sa libreng sakay. So it's sort of worked the other way. It's really a question of being able to afford it. We all want to maintain the libreng sakay. Most of all, the DepEd and all the mommies and daddies who now have to bring their kids to school for the face-to-face classes. But, quixotically, the libreng sakay ended for lack of budget. We are now in the throes of finalizing the national budget for 2023, and I hope we can find some funding for the continuation of libreng sakay. In the meantime, I understand that the wealthier cities and provinces have on their own started to fund their own libreng sakay. We've certainly done that in Ilocos Norte, but I don't know how long we'll be able to do it since we've had 2 typhoons that have been blasting away, and that's all in the wake of a series of very strong earthquakes. So, as long as we can afford it, everybody wants it, definitely. At naging masakit dahil tumigil mismo nung nag-umpisa yung face-to-face ng mga bata.
Hello po, Senator. John Session from Raptor. Speaking of mga quakes, recently si Gov Matthew Manaldok yesterday, he mentioned na he hopes aerial assets be more accessible or available for disaster rescue at daily.
Area?
Yes, aerial assets. This was also mentioned in Abra post-quake. How can LGU's capacities be strengthened in terms of equipment, facilities, and access to state resources?
Yes. That's correct. That's absolutely right. Natuklasan yan sa Abra. Talaga yun ang unang problema. as you know, the Cordillera are so high. This is a mountain range that spans the entire backbone of Luzon, from northern to central Luzon, and the mountains are huge. They're 3,000, 3,600. There is no earthly way to walk all the way up. And the only way is to airdrop food, medicine, and even construction supplies to the extent that you can. And we realized in Abra that the system of the NDRRMC is circuitous and long-winded, because a request has to be made by the local government, which then goes to the NDRRMC. It's validated by the concerned DSWD, DA, or DPWH, the concerned department. It then proceeds to the AFP. Ang haba ng proseso. The AFP that has the air assets, the Air Force, and others like the PNP that have a helicopter, for example, before they get it, there's a whole long chain of command na naman to go through. Kaya pagkahaba-haba, which is the reason why I have been recommending from the very beginning that the NDRRMC should be enhanced and upgraded, put directly under the office of the President para isang utos lamang at higit sa lahat, gawin ng not merely a coordinating body, but also an implementing arm in the state of disaster. In other words, rather familiar to us through the experience of the United States and the FEMA. Yun ang rin-recommend ko. Kasi ang hirap yung sinasabing, pag sinabi kasi sa gobyernong coordinate, alam mo na walang mangyayari ng matagal na matagal.
Hello, Senator. Good afternoon. Jim Reviosa of SMNI. Senator, kumustahin lang namin yung project is about Nutriban. Kumusta ho ito at are we expecting next year na baka available na ito sa mga sa schools natin?
Yes, sadly, more and more LGUs, more and more social workers, more and more BHWs are asking for the Nutriban project to be launched in their area. We're still preparing. We're actually trying to focus. The reason being that the finding is no longer just the buns, but the first 1,000 days of life. So that's 0 years old to 3 years old. And many of the babies still can't eat bread or any solids. So it's important to find other Cerelac or cereal or lugal that's protein and mineral enhanced. So we're still trying to formulate those and produce them in scalable numbers and distribute them adequately. Which is why we have leveled up to something called the Nutri-Bus. Doon sa bus sa linuluto, yung mga lugaw-lugaw ng mga baby at iba pa. Ang problema ngayon sa hirap ng buhay, pati yung mga lolo at lola nakikipila. So, kawawa naman, pwede ba naman sila paalisin? So, this is my quandary right now. Unfortunately, they're saying that there's 20 plus additional million poor given the pandemic and the loss of economic sustenance. So we're trying to work on that, and I'm very, very grateful to Cebu and the rest of the provinces where the movie Made in Malacanang did very, very well. Thank you very much for your support. And yung kinita doon, maraming ilalagay natin sa Nutriban and Nutribus. So, pagbayaran na ako ng mga teatro, hindi pa nagbabayad eh. Paano hindi pa tumitigil yung showing sa ibang lugar. So, we'll be able to ramp up the Nutribus. In the meantime, we're trying to dehydrate as many of our local vegetables as possible. The original project kasi was USAID with my mother, and they brought in chickpea or garbanzo flour. That was the protein enhancement. Eh, hindi naman natin afford yun kasi imported. So I'm trying to use local like coconut, peanut, cassava, and the other protein sources that are available locally.
Good noon, everybody.
Good noon. I have seen that one of the high-price driver in our country today that I think it's being some sort of being overlooked. Kasi yung power power is so expensive.
Right.
And this happened, and it never happened during the time of your dad because all the power plants were operated by the government. So, walang profit motive ang mga operators. Now, it seems to me that all the power are operated by the private sector. At saka running wild yung mga, we're the most expensive, no, sa electricity. And it seems to me, wala pa yung mga ibang do not talk about the PIRA, the review of the PIRA law. And the other one, the high price driver is the ports. I don't know if you know about this, that all of the ports now are being privatized, and these people who operate these ports, I'm sure, paid a lot of money to get those contracts, and now they're getting it back at the expense of the consumer. Ang taas ngayon ng mga port arrestry fees, Senator.
Yes, thank you, Troy. Yes, as a matter of fact, yesterday I had a meeting with a lot of foreign investors interested in coming to the Philippines or already here. Texas Instruments, SAP, Nestle, a whole group, including Citibank, which has been here for 120 years. They always tell us that among the chief deterrents to production in the Philippines is really the cost of power, that it's onerous and uncompetitive. Certainly, during the time of my father, there was PNOC. We also had the Oil Stabilization Fund. We also had a great deal of stockpiling. But that was during the time na marami tayong ipon. Maraming pera nun eh. Kaya kaya ng gobyerno bilhin yung oil, buying forward when it was cheap, letting it go when it was more expensive. And the PNOC was running and exploring and even trying to get its own energy resources, developing energy resources. But today, the situation is very, very different. So, itong EPIRA, naging vampira na, at talagang galit na tayo. It's time to take a look at it again. But having said that, there are many, many things that we need to do. And I think it has to be studied more carefully because yun nga, binenta yung PNOC, binenta yung kung ano-ano. Binenta natin lahat, tapos nagugulat na lang tayo, bakit wala ng power na affordable. So I think it's time that we look at this, and I think the developments in the ARC and the DOE say that. We are also stuck with the issues of the electrical cooperatives. If the production cost is leveled down, the problem is also the distribution cost can also be quite onerous and unreliable. So with regard to the ports, we have the highest domestic shipping rates, not only in the Arastre, but because of shipping costs inter-island. It's absurd that Cebu to Manila is what, twice or thrice what the price is of Manila to Taiwan or to Hong Kong. So it's very, very important that we rationalize all these, not only port costs, but also the quantum of shipping costs. The complaint always is that when you trade, it only goes one way and there's absolutely no backload. So there are many, many problems. We have to unravel them and solve them one by one. It's really unbearable, particularly with regard to the food shortage. There was a bumper crop, for example, early this year of pork in Jensan, Cagayan de Oro, and so on. But in Manila, pork was reaching 450 pesos per kilo and still nothing available. What we should have done was just ship out this bumper crop that came out of Mindanao and certain parts of the Visayas not yet afflicted by ASF and brought it back to Manila. So not only do we have problems in production, but also, as Troy has mentioned, in distribution.
Good afternoon, Madam Senator. Being a dynamic and versatile senator, what is your stand regarding,
Kindly introduce yourself.
I'm sorry, sir. Madam, I'm Brother Bobby Knight of Channel 47, DYLA, and DYC. My question, Madam, is about the bullying of the Chinese people, the government child, regarding this West Philippine Sea. What's your stand?
Okay, that's right. The swarming and the interference in the West Philippine Sea has become almost the new normal, which we should not allow. So I think that it is very important to engage the Chinese as well as the other claimants like Vietnam, Indonesia, Japan, and the rest, so that we can all group together and talk. Most important is to talk. I am not anti-Chinese or anti-American, but I insist that the Philippines is a sovereign state and no one should make us choose between the United States and China. This is not something that we should do or that we can do. We want a strong presence of the United States in the Philippines, including a military presence. We also want to be close to China because they are our neighbors in Asia. They are part of this community of nations in which we live, and they are our #1 trading partner and are likely to remain so in the next decade.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you.
Just to remind the media, last 2 questions before we end the forum.
Hello again, Senator.
Hi.
Well, I'm taking up the cudgel since no one's behind me to ask another question.
Yes, actually, to follow up on Manong Bobby, actually, yes, the real fear for us is that the next Ukraine will be in Asia. Taiwan is next door, and that's a very, very volatile situation. We should try to calm down nerves and fears and all kinds of other incitements in that area. Around 3 weeks ago, we got a notice in Ilocos Norte not to go to the beach because radioactive material was suspected to have fallen from rockets or other explosives from Taiwan. It's that near. So it's very scary and personal to us. We're only 400 kilometers away from Kaohsiung. Metro Manila is 550 kilometers.
All right. So to continue what I was saying earlier, there has been a lot of talk about the Philippine offshore gaming operators and their fate in the wake of the kidnappings and other crimes related to these Chinese-run organizations. Senator Imee, what is your...
May pogo ba sa Cebu? Mayroon. May pogo ba sa Cebu?
Yes. What is your stance on this, Senator, considering at this point it seems the President is still deciding on how to proceed?
Yes, I think that I was just full disclosure. I was part of the investigation. I was part of the investigative team with Senator Ronald De La Rosa, investigating the kidnapping, illegal detention, and human trafficking cases. I started investigating as early as last Congress together with Senator Risa Ontiveros, and proceeded until today. It has to be said that we had supported POGO in the beginning as an additional source of income and as part of President Duterte's financing of the build, and other infrastructure projects. However, in retrospect, looking back at what has been earned, it's not a huge amount, or at least not the amounts reported by PANCOR and BIR. These are measly sums for the aggravation and social cost that's been occurring. However, it is said that 23,000 Filipinos will be unemployed. I think let's not jump to the quick. Let's not make any rash decisions. After all, there are 23,000 Filipinos directly involved and quite a huge number of hotel, restaurant, real estate, and development companies also involved, including transport co-ops that are living largely off many of these establishments. What we have, I think, is a 2-year window. Because in many cases, these franchises will lapse in 2 years. In many cases, the lease agreements with the building and other owners lapse also in 2 years. During that period of 2 years, we should phase in more and more eco zones, more BPOs, and many other groups that are willing to invest as well as employ Filipinos. So in that 2-year period, papasok naman yung BPO. We know they're growing. Another additional 1 million jobs, according to them, will be easy to accomplish. We know there's a problem in MEPS, and many of our garment workers are also losing their jobs at 3,000-4,000 a pop. So it's very, very important that this job generation with new BPO and the broadening of eco zones should occur. If you recall, the last administration, and in fact, I was involved with the eco zone of Bulacan, the eco zones of Bataan, the eco zones of Iloilo, because I was the head of economic affairs. All of them, until today, have been vetoed. There are no new eco zones since 2016. So this is a huge problem. The finance leadership is always claiming it is foregone revenue. My argument is that even an accountant will tell you there is no foregone revenue when there was no revenue in the first place. What are we foregoing? So, to my mind, it is time that we reopen the discussion on eco zones. It's the only real way to get in big foreign investments and generate the numbers that we need to replace both the garments, electronics, and POGO losses in employment that we have already felt.
Thank you, Senator.
Any more questions, please? Kasi kung hindi kayo magtatanong, itatanong ko kailan yung... Ma'am, sinisimulan na raw yung part 2 ng Made in Malacanang. Ano ba status doon?
Yeah, talaga naman, mga marites lahat ng Pilipino. Alam na daw nila nangyari sa Malacanang noong last 3 days. Ano daw yung chismis sa Hawaii? Ano daw yung chismis sa mga sumusunod na taon? So, actually, Director Daryl Yap and I are still arguing big time over the second and the third parts of this so-called trilogy. Trilogy daw eh. Ewan ko ba. So, tignan natin. We have a target date though, early next year for a second edition. We still haven't figured out what it's going to be about. But given the proclivities of the agent provocateur that Direct Daryl is, you can be sure na pasabog na naman yan.
No more questions. Final word, ma'am? Final word from you?
Yes, thank you very much. And like I said earlier, we're in the throes of finalizing the national budget for 2023. Well, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, and we really need to get going. The recession is upon us. We already feel the difficulties in the global shrinking of the economy. Kaya kailangan na maging masinop, maging masipag, at magtipid. Sa bagay, the Cebuanos are very, very good at this. And I hope that we will come up with a budget that will address at least our primary concerns. And certainly, it's important that Visayas and Mindanao get their fair share of this budget, because year on year, 60% lands in Luzon. I don't think that's quite right. We have to be developmental and forward-looking in our efforts. Thank you. So, walang Cebuano sa Senado ngayon. So, sorry? Wala yata. So I'm the closest thing you have.
Your heart is Cebuano, ma'am.
Yeah,
If I
so
might say
I'm the
that.
closest thing you have to a Bisaya congressman or senator. Sa Congress, marami. But the issue is, in the Senate, in the bicameral, I always try to represent my mother's side, the Waray and Bisdak side. Thank you.